In this video, we will talk about how to subtract mixed numbers with unlike denominators. So I have two examples for us to work through here. Let's check out this first example. We have 4 and 5/6 minus 2 and 1/3. So we have one mixed number and we're subtracting another mixed number. So the first step is I like to rewrite this by stacking these mixed numbers on top of each other, like this. 4 and 5/6 minus 2 and 1/3. So when we write it like this, we'll notice the fractions are stacked on top of each other and the whole numbers are stacked on top of each other. So to perform this subtraction, we want to ask ourselves, what is 5/6 minus 1/3? Well, we'll notice that these two fractions don't have the same denominator. So this first fraction has a denominator of 6, and this fraction has a denominator of 3. So the first step is we want to find a common denominator between those two, because that will make it a lot easier to subtract. So we need to think, what's a common denominator between 3 and 6? Or in other words, what's the smallest number that both 3 and 6 go into? Well, that would just be 6. So our common denominator is 6. So this fraction we don't have to change because it already has a denominator of 6. But this one, 1/3, we need to rewrite that as a fraction with a denominator of 6. So now we ask ourselves, to go from 3 to 6, what do we have to do? Well, we have to multiply by 2. So whatever we do in the denominator, we need to also do in the numerator. So we need to do 1 times 2 to get our new numerator. So 1 times 2 is 2. So our new fraction is 2/6. So now we can do 5/6 minus 2/6, and that's 3/6. So let's write that right here. And then lastly, we can do 4 minus 2, which is 2. So we get 2 and 3/6. Now the last step is we'll notice that we can reduce this fraction. So if we divide the numerator by 3 and we divide the denominator by 3, we get 3 divided by 3 is 1 over 6 divided by 3 is 2. So really our final answer is 2 and a half. So let's write that right here. 2 and 1/2. So 4 and 5/6 minus 2 and 1/3 is 2 and a half. All right, let's try one more example. Let's say we have 5 and 1/4 minus 3 and 5/6. How can we perform this subtraction? Well, let's start by rewriting it as stacking these two mixed numbers on top of each other. So we'll say 5 and 1/4 minus 3 and 5/6. So now we start by saying, what is 1/4 minus 5/6? Well, notice they don't have the same denominator. So here we have a denominator of 4, and here we have a denominator of 6. So we need to find a common denominator between these two numbers to make the subtraction easier. So what is the common denominator between 4 and 6? Or in other words, what's the smallest number that 4 and 6 both go into? Well, that would be 12. And if that's not obvious to you, one way you can figure that out is just list out some multiples of 4. So like 4, 8, 12, 16, and then list out some multiples of 6. So let's say 6, 12, 18, 24, and you're just looking for the first number that appears in both lists. So we can see that would be a 12. So that's the least common denominator between 4 and 6. So let's go ahead and rewrite these fractions using fractions that have denominators of 12. So for this first fraction, what do we have to do to go from 4 to 12? We have to multiply by 3. So we have to do the same thing in the numerator. We have to do 1 times 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. So this new fraction becomes 3/12. Now for this one, to go from 6 to 12, what do we have to do? We have to multiply by 2. So we do the same thing in the numerator. 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. So 5/6 becomes 10/12. So now we say, what is 3/12 minus 10/12? Well, 10/12 is greater than 3/12. So we can't directly perform that subtraction. So what we have to do is we need to borrow from our whole number right here. So this 5, we need to cross that out and make it 1 less. So 1 less than 5 is 4. And now what we get to do is we get to add one whole number to 3/12. So the way that we do that is we say plus 12 over 12. Because 12 over 12, when you have a fraction like this where the numerator and the denominator are the same number, this fraction is just equal to 1. So we're just adding 1. So 3/12 plus 12/12, that's a total of 15/12. So let's write that right here. 15/12. Okay, so now we can do 15/12 minus 10/12. That would be 5/12. And then lastly, we have 4 minus 3, which is 1. So here's our final answer, 1 and 5/12. So 5 and 1/4 minus 3 and 5/6 is 1 and 5/12. So those were just two different examples of how you can subtract mixed numbers with unlike denominators.